They came to me with a compromise: give up half the house, and they'd take care of me. Naïve. I put on a lock so strong that even the thought of it now scares them. If you'd told me 2 years ago that I'd be sitting alone at my kitchen table staring at a half-empty bottle of bourbon my late husband never finished, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, my son, David, still called me Mama, with that warm lilt in his voice, not the sharp, dismissive tone I hear now. We'd been close, closer than most mothers and sons, I'd thought. After my husband Samuel passed, it was David who promised me, "I'll take care of you, Mama. You won't have to worry about a thing." And I believed him. I believed every word because he was all I had left. But the truth about people is like the truth about tea. You only see the full color when it's been steeped long enough. And life, well, it steeped my son into someone I barely recognized. It all started small. A little jab here, a raised eyebrow there. "Mama, you can't be spending money on those church luncheons," he'd say, as if I didn't know how to budget my own life. I brushed it off as concern. Maybe he was just stressed. But then, 3 months ago, I overheard him on the phone with his wife, Tanya. I was on my way to the laundry room when his voice drifted down the hall. "We can't list the house until she's out," he said. My heart stopped mid-step. "The house? My house?" I pressed my hand against the wall, listening. Tanya's voice was too faint to catch, but his reply was sharp. "We'll move her into Shady Pines. She's old, she won't fight it. And once she's there, we can sell this place and put a down payment on our own." If you've never felt your stomach turn to stone, I hope you never do. I stood there frozen, my laundry basket digging into my hip, while my own son plotted to trade my life for a mortgage. That night, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I prayed instead. Sat on the edge of my bed and asked the Lord for clarity, because if I opened my mouth in that moment, I'd burn every bridge between us. And here's the thing. Sometimes the Lord doesn't answer with a whisper. Sometimes he lets the storm roll in so you can see who stands with you when the roof starts leaking. I didn't have to wait long for the storm. 2 weeks later, David sat me down at this very kitchen table. His words were wrapped in false kindness, like a rotten apple covered in sugar. "Mama, Tanya and I have been thinking it might be better for you to be somewhere with more help." "Help," I repeated, my voice steady though my hands itched to slam against the table. "Is that what we're calling it now?" He shifted in his seat. "It's just, this place is too big for you to manage alone. And, well, Tanya's pregnant and..." There it was. The bait, the justification. As if a baby erased the fact that this was my home, built with my husband's hands, paid for with decades of our sweat and sacrifice. I leaned back in my chair, looking him over. He wore that same polite smile I'd seen him use on strangers he didn't care about. That's when I knew this wasn't just Tanya's idea. David had his fingerprints all over it. I didn't answer him then, but in my mind, a plan was already taking shape. If my own son wanted to turn my home into his down payment, he'd learn real quick that the Lord might forgive, but a mother who's been betrayed never forgets. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my side, counting the slow clicks of the hallway clock, listening to the house breathe like an old friend who'd run out of patience for whispered lies. At 4 a.m, I got up, brewed coffee in my dented percolator, and pulled the shoebox down from the pantry shelf, the one Samuel labeled "in case of rain." My husband wasn't a poet, but he believed in weather. He believed storms come for every roof eventually, and that a family stands or falls on how it patches. Inside the box were copies of the deed, the will, 2 life insurance letters, and a small black notebook with Samuel's tidy handwriting. I ran a finger across his name like a prayer. The deed was clear as daylight. The house belonged to me outright. No mortgage, no liens, no fine print for a clever son to twist. The will, updated after Samuel passed, named me sole owner and executor. And that notebook? It held 20 years of notes on repairs, taxes paid, even the name of a lawyer Samuel liked, because he kept his word and his fees honest. By sunrise, I had a plan. It wasn't dramatic. I wouldn't scream or throw plates. That's show. Show don't hold up in court. Paper does. At 9, I put on my navy dress, the one I wore to church when I needed to feel armored, and walked 2 blocks to see Mr. Whitaker, the lawyer Samuel trusted. His waiting room smelled like lemon oil and old victories. He looked older than I remembered. Chin sunk deeper into his collar, but his eyes sharpened when I placed the box on his desk. "Morning, Mr. Whitaker," I said. "I believe there's a sale being planned for a house that's not for sale." He skimmed the deed, the will, the notebook, nodding slow, the way men nod when bones settle back into their sockets. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "legally, you're fortified, but families, well, law doesn't always stop a bad idea from getting legs." "I'm not asking the law to stop anything," I said, folding my hands. "I'm asking it to shine a light. I want something on paper that says exactly what already is. This home is mine. I ain't incompetent, and no one moves me anywhere I don't choose to go." He smiled at that. "We'll draft an affidavit of competency, notarize it today. We'll also file a notice with the county recorder reaffirming title, and, if you want, we can place a simple sign in the legal notices. Owner has no intention to sell. Buyers and realtors read those. Cuts rumors off at the knee." "Do all 3, I said. "And one more thing. I need a letter. Plain talk. No legalese. Addressed to my son and his wife. I want them to know what line they're crossing." He tapped his pen. "Plain talk I can do." By noon, I had copies tucked in my red handbag. When I stepped onto the sidewalk, the sun felt different, less like heat, more like clarity. I walked home slow, stopping at Mrs. Alvarez's stoop when she waved me over with a plate of empanadas. "You look like a woman with a to-do list, Gloria," she said, squinting at me. "You need anything besides a prayer and this pastry?" "Not yet," I said, taking a bite. "But keep your porch light on this week. If you hear raised voices, it's just the truth getting its exercise." She laughed, then squeezed my hand. "I'll keep watch." At 3, Tanya showed up unannounced, belly just starting to round under a linen blouse, her perfume 1 note too expensive for our block. She hugged herself instead of me, a habit of people who want to look kind without touching the mess they made. "Hi, Mama," she said, bright as a paper flower. "Thought I'd swing by with prenatal vitamins and a brochure. Shady Pines. Did David show you? It's really lovely. They have watercolor classes and a reading room." "You think they got room for a woman who ain't going?" I asked, opening the door wider so she could see the framed deed on the entry table where I'd placed it on purpose. Her smile wobbled. "We just want what's best for you. The stairs here are steep. Been steep for 40 years. My knees and I negotiated terms a long time ago." She hovered near the threshold, scanning for support in the wainscoting. "Look, Mama, it's temporary. The market is up and markets fall," I said. "But character shouldn't." Color rose under her makeup. For a second, I saw the girl she used to be at our Sunday dinners, quick to laugh, first to help with dishes, before the world taught her how to stack politeness on top of entitlement and call it care. I almost softened. Almost. "Since you're here," I said, "take this to David." I handed her Mr. Whitaker's letter. "Read it if you like. Either way, the message is the same. This house is not for sale, and I am not for rehoming. She took the envelope like it might burn. He'll be upset. He's free to be. Emotions are free. Moving me isn't. When she left, I sat at the table and exhaled the steadiness I'd been wearing like a borrowed coat. My hands shook, then stilled. The clock ticked on. At 5, the front door opened without a knock. David. He never knocked. My son, 6'2", shoulders wide like his daddy's, jaw tight like a man cornered by his own choices. "You went to a lawyer?" He said, "No hello, no mama." He held the letter like a warrant. "I did." He paced 2 steps, 3, then pointed at the deed I'd framed. "This is petty." "This is paper," I said. "Paper is how grown folk keep peace when love forgets its job." He scoffed, but the sound cracked. "You're being unreasonable. We need the equity. The baby is not a pawn," I said, "and you are not a boy. If you want a house, earn one. That's how your father and I did it. We didn't put my mother in a home and sell her kitchen to pay our bills." His eyes flashed. "It's not like that. It is exactly like that." I pushed a second envelope across the table. Affidavit of competency, notarized, county notice reinforcing title, legal notice going to print tomorrow. You will not sign my name, you will not list my property, and you will not bring strangers to measure the living room while I'm making grits. He dropped into a chair, then, all bluster leaking out. I watched my child collapse into a man I didn't recognize, a man who wanted shortcuts where discipline should be. For a breath, grief tried to fold me in half. But grief, like any heavy quilt, will smother if you let it. I folded it back. "Why, David?" I asked softly. "When did your need become permission to take?" He stared at his hands. "We're drowning," he muttered. "Tanya's hours got cut. My bonus didn't come through. We're behind, and this," he swept a hand at the walls, "is just sitting here." "This," I said, tapping the table, "is a life. Bricks and breaths and birthdays. And it is not sitting. It is sheltering me. I am not a placeholder until your next check arrives." For a long minute, we sat in the kind of thick silence you only get in rooms where love once did hard work. He finally stood. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I said, "but it'll be my mistake." He hesitated at the doorway. "We'll talk later." "We will," I said. "At church Sunday, bring Tanya, bring your listening ears." After he left, I locked the door, a habit I rarely had in daylight. I washed dishes I hadn't used just to steady my hands. Then I did the bravest thing I'd done all day. I called my pastor and told him everything. He listened, didn't rush to fix it, just said, "We'll stand with you." And for the first time since I heard my son on that hallway phone, I believed I might not weather this storm alone. But I didn't know then, couldn't know, that the real betrayal wasn't the plan to move me. It was older, quieter, already living inside these walls like mold behind paint. And it would take one Sunday service, one accidentally on purpose reveal, to peel the plaster clean off. Stay with me. What happened at church turned my kitchen table resolve into a reckoning none of us could outrun. Sunday morning came wrapped in that sticky Georgia heat that makes your dress cling before you've even locked the front door. I wore my lilac church suit, the one Samuel said made me look like I belonged in the choir, even though my singing could peel paint. The hat, wide-brimmed with a silk flower, was my armor. Church folk read hats like soldiers read medals. Mine said I was showing up to be seen, not hidden. I could have skipped service. After the week I'd had, no one would have blamed me. But the Lord doesn't let you duck the lessons he's written in pen. And if there was a reckoning brewing, I wanted it in his house, not my kitchen. The moment I stepped into the vestibule, I felt the ripple. Conversations dipped, then swelled again, like folks had to change the subject mid-sentence. Sister Marlene, who'd been side-eyeing my son's wife for months, gave me a slow nod and the kind of smile that carried more news than comfort. Pastor Williams greeted me with both hands. "Sister Gloria," he said, warmth in his voice but weight in his eyes. "Good to see you this morning." I caught the glance he shot toward the third pew on the left. There sat David and Tanya, hands folded too neatly, eyes fixed forward like school children in trouble. I slid into the opposite side of the sanctuary. If they wanted a show, I'd give them the whole matinee and evening performance. Hymns came and went, but it was during the announcements that the crack split wide open. Sister Pauline, God bless her gentle spirit, took the mic to thank the congregation for their generosity in last month's support for the Carter Family Fund. She read out the total. "We raised $12,000 to help Brother David and Sister Tanya secure a stable home for their growing family." Murmurs bloomed like weeds. My heart dropped, then shot back up, pounding so hard it felt like my hat might lift clean off. $12,000? A fundraiser, and no one thought to tell me. I kept my eyes forward, my hands still, but inside the floor was tilting. That was more than the $10,000 David wanted from me. They'd been planning 2 moves all along, mine out, theirs in, and they'd done it with church money. When service ended, I waited, let the crowd thin. I watched David shake hands, Tanya lean into hugs, all smiles now that the community blessing had been announced. When they finally reached the aisle where I stood, I stepped in close enough for Tanya to smell the cinnamon gum I was chewing. "Lovely total they raised," I said, voice sweet as pound cake. "Almost covers the cost of buying out your own mama without having to tell her." David stiffened. "It's not like that. It's exactly like that," I cut in. "And now it's public, which means you've invited the whole congregation to witness whether you honor your mama or rob her." Tanya's mouth opened, then shut. David glanced toward the pastor, who was watching us from the back with an expression that said he'd heard every word. I didn't stay for the potluck. I walked home slow, letting the weight of the revelation settle into something I could carry without breaking. The money they'd raised wasn't illegal, but it was built on omission, and omission is just a quieter kind of lie. Back at the house, I took the framed deed off the entry table and set it in the living room window, angled toward the street. Anyone walking by could see it. Above it, I taped a handwritten sign. "Not for sale. Owner resides here." By evening, word had started its usual marathon through the neighborhood. Mrs. Alvarez knocked to say she'd heard things and offered to bring her brother, who knows about property disputes. I thanked her, but my mind was already spinning something tighter than neighborly watchfulness. If David and Tanya thought they could ride the wave of church charity straight into my living room, they were about to find out what it felt like when that wave hit a seawall. And the best part? The seawall was painted lilac and wore a silk-flowered hat, smiling all the while. The week ahead would require precision. Paperwork was one kind of armor, but public perception was another. And in the South, reputation could make or break a man before a judge ever saw the case. I wasn't just going to protect my home. I was going to make sure anyone with a mind to help my son at my expense thought twice before joining his cause. I went to bed early that night, but I didn't pray for reconciliation. I prayed for resolve. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the Lord understood the difference. Because some battles aren't about winning, they're about not surrendering the ground you've already bled for. The next morning, the neighborhood grapevine was in full harvest. You could practically hear the chatter floating over the hedges, half curiosity, half pity, with just enough scandal sprinkled in to keep tongues wagging. By 9 o'clock, Mrs. Alvarez had already accidentally stopped by again, this time with a basket of muffins and a head full of fresh updates. "Gloria," she whispered as if the azaleas might be listening, "Tanya was over at the beauty shop this morning saying you've been acting erratic. She said maybe you need—" She glanced toward the ceiling as if divine permission were required. "Professional supervision," I laughed, a short, sharp sound that tasted more like steel than humor. "Erratic? I've been making biscuits from scratch and paying my bills on time since before she learned to tie her own shoes. If that's erratic, then the dictionary's gone blind." Mrs. Alvarez nodded so hard her earrings clinked. "That's what I told her. But you know how people hear what they want. Be careful, Gloria. I've seen this play before. First, they plant seeds about your mind, then they show up with papers saying you can't handle your own affairs." I'd been thinking the same thing since yesterday, which is why I'd already placed 2 calls before she arrived. One to my doctor for a clean bill of mental and physical health, and another to Pastor Williams, requesting a meeting. If Tanya wanted to paint me as unfit, she was going to need a canvas that wasn't already covered in certified evidence to the contrary. At 11, I got in my Buick, still running smooth as a hymn, and drove to the church office. Pastor Williams ushered me in, shutting the door behind us. His face carried that careful balance of shepherd and referee. "Sister Gloria," he began, "I heard some troubling things yesterday, and I'd like to understand before assumptions take root." "Pastor," I said, folding my hands in my lap, "trouble only grows where lies are watered. My son and his wife are trying to move me into assisted living so they can sell my home. They raised money under the guise of securing a place for their growing family. Money I suspect they'll now use to sweeten their offer to themselves." His brows drew together. "Is there proof?" "Proof?" I reached into my bag and laid out the notarized affidavit, the reaffirmed deed, the county notice, and a copy of Mr. Whitaker's letter. "There's more paper here than in your bulletin stack." He scanned each page, nodding. "I see, and your mental competence is beyond question." I smiled. "Doctor's appointment tomorrow to certify it, though I'd be happy to recite all 66 books of the Bible right now if you're in a hurry." He chuckled at that, then grew serious. "This puts me in a difficult position, Gloria. Church funds were raised in good faith." "In good faith," I echoed. "But if that faith is being twisted into a crowbar to pry me out of my home, then it's time for some gospel truth in the daylight." We talked another 20 minutes, and by the end, Pastor Williams agreed to address the matter discreetly with the deacons. That was fine by me. Discretion can still be a spotlight if you point it the right way. When I got home, Tanya's SUV was parked out front. Inside, she was at my kitchen table, sipping sweet tea like she owned the place. David sat beside her, scrolling his phone, eyes darting up as I entered. "Mama," David started, "we need to talk about next steps." I set my purse down slowly. "Next steps? You mean the ones that start with me packing a suitcase and end with you holding open house tours?" Tanya's lips tightened. "You're twisting this. We just want what's safe for you." "Safe is a matter of perspective," I said. "I feel safest in the home I've lived in for 42 years, and I feel most endangered when my own family is scheming to take it." David sighed, running a hand down his face. "We're not scheming, Mama. We're planning for the future." "Your future," I corrected, "at the expense of mine." I walked to the window, gesturing toward the framed deed for emphasis. That paper in the window isn't just a decoration, it's the law, and as of this week, it's also public knowledge in the county recorder's office. Which means if you so much as try to list this address without my signature, you'll be answering questions from folks in suits. Not just me. Tanya's eyes narrowed. So you'd really drag your own son into court? If my own son drags me into a corner, yes, I said flatly. And let me assure you, Tanya, the Lord may love you unconditionally, but the state of Georgia does not. The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. Finally, David stood, muttering something about needing air, and Tanya followed, heels clicking against the tile. I watched from the porch as they got into the SUV, their heads bent close in tense conversation. I didn't know if they were plotting their next move or starting to realize the game had changed. Either way, I knew one thing. I had just moved my queen across the board, and they were going to have to think very carefully before making their next play. But something told me they weren't the kind to back down quietly. And the next round, it might not be about papers or polite words anymore. By Wednesday, the air in the neighborhood was so thick with half-truths you could slice it with a butter knife. People I'd known for decades suddenly greeted me with that cautious smile folks reserve for the recently widowed or the quietly unwell. I'd been both before. This wasn't that. This was the look of someone wondering if the rumors might be true. I caught the tail end of it outside the Piggly Wiggly. 2 women from choir, heads bent together over the cantaloupe bin, whispering like bees around honey. My name floated out between them, tethered to the word unstable. I didn't stop, didn't correct them. I just kept walking, pushing my cart like the aisles were my own private runway. Back home, the phone call started. Sister Pauline wanted to check in. Brother Leroy said he'd heard some concerning things and was lifting me up in prayer. All well-meaning, all nudging for confirmation without asking directly. It didn't take a detective to see whose fingerprints were on this little PR campaign. Tanya had always been good at sweet-talking people into seeing her side of a story. She just forgot I'd been doing it better for 40 years. By Thursday morning, Mrs. Alvarez stopped by again, this time with a look that could have soured milk. "Gloria," she said, "I overheard Tanya at the corner store. She was telling Mrs. Harris you'd left the oven on twice last week and nearly burned the house down." I laughed. Too loud maybe, but I couldn't help it. "I haven't even turned the oven on this week," I said. "Been living on cold chicken and coleslaw. Lord save us from creative liars." But that lie was more dangerous than gossip about my attitude. It was a brick in the wall they were trying to build. The case for why I couldn't live alone. And if enough bricks stacked up, someone outside the family might decide to get involved. That's when I decided to stop playing defense. I dug out my old spiral-bound notebook, the one I'd used when Samuel and I organized block parties and kept track of who brought what. On a fresh page, I started a list, every conversation, every rumor, every person repeating it. Dates, times, exact words. If Tanya wanted to build her wall, I'd be ready to tear it down brick by brick with receipts. Friday afternoon brought the first real face-off. I was out on the porch watering my petunias when David pulled up, alone this time. He didn't even bother parking straight, just left the car angled like he might bolt at any moment. "Mama," he started, taking the steps 2 at a time, "we need to talk. Tanya says you've been telling people we're trying to steal your house." I set down the watering can and met his eyes. "I haven't been telling people anything, David. I've been answering their questions honestly. If the truth makes you uncomfortable, that's not my fault." He ran a hand through his hair, looking more boy than man for the first time in weeks. "This is getting out of hand. People are starting to think we're exactly what you are." I finished. Then maybe the problem isn't the thinking, it's the doing. His jaw tightened. Tanya's worried about you. No, Tanya's worried about her timeline, I said. And if she's so concerned, she can come say it to my face instead of hiding behind Mrs. Harris in the cantaloupe aisle. That one hit. I could see it in the way his gaze dropped to the porch boards. It's not like that, he muttered. It's exactly like that, I said again, softer this time, almost like I was tired of repeating it, which in truth I was. You're my son. I raised you better than to think you can lie me out of my own life, but if you keep going, I will fight you with everything I've got. And David, I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I've got more than you think. He didn't answer, just turned and went back down the steps. The car door slammed harder than necessary, but he didn't speed off. Sat there a minute, hands gripping the wheel like maybe he was weighing his next move. Then he drove away slow, like a man carrying a plan he wasn't ready to share. That night, I slept with my phone on the nightstand, the notebook beside it. If they were going to push harder, I wanted to be ready to document every shove. What I didn't expect was that the next shove wouldn't come from them directly. It would come from a knock on my door Saturday morning, and the man standing there would be wearing a badge. The knock was firm, deliberate, 3 solid raps that didn't belong to a neighbor with a plate of pie. I opened the door to find a man in a neatly pressed shirt, badge clipped to his belt, holding a folder. Mrs. Carter? He asked, his tone courteous but official. That's me, I said, squaring my shoulders. My name's Officer Daniels. I'm with Fulton County Adult Protective Services. I received a report expressing concern about your ability to live independently. Mind if I come in for a few minutes? My stomach tightened, but my face didn't flinch. You can come in, I said, but before you do, I'll need to see that badge up close. He stepped forward, and I examined it carefully. Legitimate. This wasn't a bluff from David or Tanya. It was the real thing. I opened the door wider. Come on in, officer, but you should know I've been expecting something like this. He raised an eyebrow as we walked toward the kitchen. Expecting it? I gestured toward the table where I laid out a neat stack of documents. Affidavit of competency, notarized this week, letter from my attorney, updated deed to my home, and, since you're here, my doctor's note from yesterday stating I am in excellent mental and physical health. He glanced at the papers, then back at me. Well, that's thorough. I'm a thorough woman, I said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Cream and sugar? Black's fine, thank you, he replied, taking a seat. We talked for 20 minutes. He asked about my daily routines, how I handled bills, if I had support in emergencies. I answered each question calmly, occasionally sliding over more proof. My checkbook balanced to the penny, grocery receipts, the electric bill paid early. Finally, he closed the folder. Mrs. Carter, from everything I've seen today, there's no indication you're unable to live independently. I'll file my report accordingly. I leaned back in my chair. I appreciate that, officer. And while you're here, let me guess. This concern came from a relative, didn't it? He hesitated, then said, I can't disclose who made the report, but yes, it often happens that way. I nodded slowly. Well, you can let the record show I'm not the one in trouble here, and if there's any further concern, I'll be glad to meet it with more paper and less patience. He gave a small smile as he stood. Understood, ma'am. I'll be on my way. When the door shut behind him, I stood in the middle of my living room, letting the silence settle. They'd actually gone there, called the state on me. That wasn't just bold, it was reckless. I picked up my phone and dialed Mrs. Alvarez. "Sweetheart," I said when she answered, "I'm hosting a little gathering tomorrow. Coffee, pound cake, just a few friends. Pass the word along. Anyone's welcome." By the next afternoon, half the block was in my living room, sipping coffee and nibbling cake while I told the story. Calmly, without venom, just the plain truth. I described the visit from Adult Protective Services, how I'd been prepared, how the officer left with a report clearing me entirely. I didn't accuse, didn't name names, but every head in that room knew exactly who I was talking about. "Now," I said, smiling sweetly, "I'm not one to stir pots unnecessarily, but I thought it best to let folks know in case they hear alternative versions." The message landed. By the time the crowd thinned, I could see the tide turning in their eyes. Neighbors who had been cautious before were now nodding firmly, offering quiet support, promising to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. Later that evening, I noticed Tanya's SUV drive slowly past the house, not once, but twice. On the second pass, I stood at the window with the framed deed in plain view and raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "They tried to take me down through the law. The law said no. Now the neighborhood knows, and they're the ones standing alone." But even as I felt the ground shift in my favor, a voice deep inside warned me it wasn't over. They hadn't played their last card. And sure enough, 3 days later, David showed up again. This time he wasn't angry or defensive. He was smiling. Too much. The kind of smile a man wears when he thinks he's finally found the move that will win the game. David's smile was the first warning. Wide, teeth showing, but not touching his eyes. The second was the bakery box in his hands, pecan pie from Miss Ruth's. My son knew I loved it, but he also knew I could smell a peace offering before he even knocked. "Mama," he said, stepping inside like he'd been invited. "Got you something sweet? Thought we could talk without all the tension." I took the box, set it on the counter without opening it. "Pie's a start," I said, "but talk comes before dessert." He glanced around the kitchen as if checking to see if we were alone. "Okay. Here's the thing. Tanya and I have been thinking we might have come at this the wrong way. We're willing to compromise." That word, compromise, was like a thorn in my ear. I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I'm listening." He pulled out a chair, sat down like a salesman about to pitch. "What if you sold the house, but only part of the property? You'd still have a smaller place built right here on the back lot. No stairs, easier to maintain. You'd keep living here, but we'd get the equity from the sale of the main house to start fresh." I stared at him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. "So you want to cut my home in half and call it kindness?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. "You'd have a brand new space. We'd cover construction. You'd still be close to us and you'd still get the sale money," I finished. "David, do you think I don't see the strings in that bow you're trying to tie?" He sighed, leaning back. "Mama, we're in a tough spot. Tanya's hours got cut again. The baby's coming. We can't keep renting. And this would solve everything." "For you," I said. "Not for me. For me, it's losing the home your father and I built, the porch where you took your first steps, the kitchen where I taught you to make cornbread. You're asking me to carve up my life so you can skip a few years of hard work." His jaw tightened. "It's not skipping. It's surviving." I shook my head. Surviving doesn't mean taking from someone who's still standing. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Shame, maybe. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "So that's it? You won't even consider it?" "I considered it the second you said it," I replied, "and decided I like my walls where they are." He pushed back from the table, the legs scraping against the floor. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, David, I said, my voice steady. You made it hard the day you decided my home was your solution instead of your inheritance. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he glanced at the pie box, then back at me. Fine, but don't say I didn't try. After he left, I opened the box and cut a slice. Sweet, buttery, perfect, but I couldn't finish it. Not with the aftertaste of his smile still hanging in the air. That night I called Mr. Whitaker, my lawyer, told him about the compromise. He chuckled, low and knowing. Mrs. Carter, I've seen this move before. They frame it as mutual benefit, but the contracts will always favor them. I'm not signing a thing, I said. Good, he replied, but let's go one better. We'll put a covenant on the property. No subdivision or sale without your explicit consent. Filed with the county. That way, even if someone tries to sneak a sale through, it won't pass title search. By the next afternoon, the paperwork was in motion. It felt like putting another lock on the door, one they couldn't pick. With charm or guilt, I didn't tell David about it. Let him think the board was still in play. Sometimes letting someone believe they have a chance is the best way to make them show their hand. What I didn't realize was that Tanya had been playing her own game on the side. And the next time I saw her, she wasn't smiling. She was holding something in her hand that could make even a solid woman like me feel the floor shift under her feet. It was late Saturday afternoon when Tanya appeared on my porch. No car idling at the curb this time. She must have parked around the corner. She stood there in a fitted blazer, hair smoothed down to perfection, and a thin manila folder clutched in her hand like it was a weapon. Gloria, she said, her voice too polite to be sincere, we need to talk. I didn't move to open the screen door. If this is about pie, you're a week late. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It's about you, and about what's best for the family. I finally opened the door, but only enough for her to step inside. Say your piece. She placed the folder on my kitchen table and slid it toward me. These are copies of reports, conversations I've had with people from church, neighbors, even Mrs. Alvarez. They've all expressed concern about your memory lapses, your confusion. I stared at the folder, then back at her. You really went and wrote yourself a bedtime story, didn't you? It's not a story, she said, her tone sharper now. It's documentation. And if we take it to court, it could convince a judge that you need a guardian. You'd still have a place to live, of course, but we'd be making the decisions. I didn't touch the folder. And let me guess, the first decision would be to sell this house. Her silence was answer enough. I took a slow breath, letting the air fill me the way my mama taught me before a hard truth needed saying. Tanya, do you think I don't know the difference between gossip and evidence? Those pages you've got are hearsay, pretty, wrapping around a box of nothing. And if you want to wave them in front of a judge, you'd better be ready for me to unpack every lie inside them. Her chin lifted, defiance flashing in her eyes. And you think people will take your word over mine? Not just my word, I said, finally sliding the folder toward me. I flipped it open, scanning the first few pages. See, I've been keeping my own notes. Dates, times, names, including the day you told Mrs. Harris I'd left the oven on, when in fact I was at my doctor's appointment getting a clean bill of health. You know, the same doctor who's already filed that report with the county. Her face faltered. Just for a second, but I saw it. And, I continued, I've got signed statements from the pastor, Mrs. Alvarez, and half the block saying they've never seen me act confused or forgetful. I could drop them at my lawyer's office tomorrow morning, but I'm willing to make you a deal." Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of deal?" I closed the folder and pushed it back toward her. "You walk away from this. No more phone calls to the county, no more planting rumors in the pews, no more schemes to carve up my life. In return, I don't take this whole sorry mess to the congregation and let them see exactly how far you and David have been willing to go." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I could almost hear the gears turning, calculating risk, weighing what it would mean to lose face in front of every person who mattered to her. Finally, she stood, snatching the folder off the table. "You think you've won," she said. "No," I replied, my voice calm. "I think I've kept what's mine. There's a difference." She left without slamming the door, which told me she wasn't done entirely, but she'd been set back. Hard. That night, I called David. I didn't rant, didn't accuse. I just said, "Your wife came by. We had a talk. I suggest you both leave me out of your plans from here on, because the next time it won't be a conversation. It'll be court." He didn't argue. Just a quiet, "I understand," before the line went dead. Weeks passed. The knocks stopped. The gossip faded. Tanya still avoided my eyes at church, and David's visits were rare, stiff, and short, but my home remained mine. My porch stayed mine. My life stayed mine. One Sunday after service, Pastor William stopped me at the door. "Sister Gloria," he said, "I don't know all the details, but I do know this. You've stood your ground with grace. Not everyone could have." I smiled, adjusting the brim of my hat. "Pastor, grace is knowing when to pray and when to lock the gate." And as I walked back to my lilac house, the autumn sun spilling over the roofline, I knew this much for certain. I'd fought for what mattered, and I'd won.